The tragic death of Chris Adams is something no WWE fan will ever forget. But honestly, what's even more shocking are the controversies he faced while he was still alive. So, let's dive into his story and find out what really happened. Chris Adams was born on February 10, 1955, in Rugby, England. From an early age, he was drawn to sports, especially those that demanded physical strength and discipline. Before wrestling ever entered his life, Adams was already a decorated athlete in Judo. He wasn't just good, he was exceptional. British national Judo champion, showing early signs of the balance, precision, and focus that would define his wrestling style later on. His Judo background also gave him a unique edge when he transitioned to professional wrestling. It made his moves look crisp, real, and incredibly smooth. He officially entered the world of pro wrestling in the early 1970s, starting his career in his home country. Adams wrestled for several British promotions, most notably the famous Joint Promotions, which featured some of the UK's best talents of that time. Barrett quickly noticed him. With his lean, athletic build and confident personality, he stood out among the rest. His polite demeanor and technical wrestling ability earned him the nickname that would stick with him for the rest of his life. Gentleman. Chris Adams. But behind that polite image was a fierce competitor who could take down anyone in the ring. By the late 1970s, Adams had made a name for himself across the UK and Europe, but his ambitions were bigger than that. Like many British wrestlers at the time, he wanted to make it big in the United States, the heart of the wrestling world. That opportunity finally came in the early 1980s, and when it did, Adams grabbed it with both hands. He made his American debut in Fritz von Erich's World-Class Championship Wrestling, based in Texas. This promotion was red hot in the 1980s, thanks to the popularity of the Von Erich family. And even though Adams was a newcomer to American fans, it didn't take long for him to become one of the top names in the company. He had everything: a technical style that looked real, the charisma of a veteran, and the charm that made fans instantly connect with him. At first, Adams was presented as the ultimate gentleman from England, refined, respectful, and disciplined. But in Texas, where fans loved fiery personalities and wild brawls, Adams eventually started showing a more aggressive side. This mix of British technique and raw intensity made him stand out. He wasn't just another pretty face in the ring. He was someone who could wrestle circles around almost anyone. Adams quickly found himself in major storylines in WCCW, including intense rivalries with the likes of Gino Hernandez, Jimmy Garvin, and of course, members of the Von Erich family. His feud with Gino Hernandez, in particular, was one of the most talked about in the territory. The two had incredible chemistry. Both were flashy, arrogant, and full of confidence. Their matches were fast-paced, physical, and dramatic, perfectly capturing the larger-than-life energy that WCCW fans loved. As his popularity grew, Adams began experimenting with new moves and techniques. One of those moves would eventually become legendary, the super kick. Years before Shawn Michaels made it famous as sweet chin music, Chris Adams was using it as one of his signature moves. His version was sharp, sudden, and delivered with such precision that it looked devastating. Many fans and historians credit him as one of the first wrestlers to popularize the super kick, which became one of the most copied moves in wrestling history. Through the mid-1980s, Adams continued to climb the ranks in WCCW, winning multiple championships and building a reputation as one of the best technical wrestlers in the world. He was known not just for his athleticism, but also for his storytelling in the ring. He could make any match feel real, emotional, and intense. Fans respected him, wrestlers admired him, and promoters valued him. He was living the dream he had worked so hard for. But while his career looked great from the outside, Adams's life behind the curtain was starting to get complicated. Wrestling in the 1980s was brutal. Long road trips, late nights, constant travel, and endless pressure to perform. It was a lifestyle that could wear anyone down. And though Adams kept his gentleman persona alive in front of the camera, those closest to him began noticing changes. The constant grind and exhaustion were starting to take a toll on his spirit. Still, Adams never stopped improving his craft. After his successful run in WCCW, He wrestled for various promotions across the US and overseas, including tours in Japan, where his technical style was especially appreciated. He also became known as a teacher and mentor. Using his experience, Adams began training young wrestlers, helping them develop their technique and ring awareness. One of those students would go on to become one of the biggest stars in wrestling history, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Under Adams's guidance, Austin learned the fundamentals of wrestling, the holds, the pacing, and how to tell a story inside the ring. Adams even worked matches against his student, giving Austin real in-ring experience early in his career. In later interviews, Steve Austin often gave Adams credit for shaping his foundation as a wrestler, calling him an incredible teacher who cared deeply about the business. By the early 1990s, Adams's influence in wrestling was undeniable. But his own career began to slow down. The industry was changing, with new promotions and younger stars taking over the spotlight. Adams still had the skill and experience, but he struggled to find consistent success in the big leagues. He had a short run in WCW during the late 1990s, but it never reached the level fans had hoped for. Despite his talent, he was used sparingly, and before long, he was released from the company. For a man who had once helped shape the careers of future superstars, it was a tough blow. Still, Adams continued wrestling on the independent circuit and training others, hoping to find one more big break. He was well respected by those who worked with him. Everyone knew he had the skills and experience that few could match. But the truth was, Adams was growing frustrated. His WCW run hadn't gone the way he wanted, and opportunities were starting to dry up. Behind the scenes, he was struggling with feelings of disappointment and uncertainty about his future. Part the late man, Chris Adams that fans had once adored was starting to fade. He was still wrestling occasionally and teaching others, but the passion and spark that once defined him were being slowly replaced by stress, exhaustion, and personal problems that were quietly building up. Behind the confident smile and British charm, Adams was fighting some serious inner battles. Years of physical pain, broken dreams, and personal disappointments were catching up to him. And like many wrestlers of his generation, he started leaning on drugs and alcohol to cope. At first, it probably seemed harmless, just a way to relax after long nights on the road or ease the pain from years of brutal matches. But over time, it became a serious problem. Adams developed a dependency that began to take over both his personal and professional life. People who knew him started noticing changes in his behavior. The calm, respectful gentleman could turn into someone unpredictable and even aggressive when intoxicated. Wrestling historian Dave Meltzer once wrote that Adams' drug addiction ruined both his career and personal life. It was a sad reality. Adams had all the talent in the world, but the same discipline that once made him a champion in judo and wrestling was slipping away. Promoters stopped trusting him. His once bright reputation began to dim. The man who used to teach others how to stay focused and professional was now struggling to follow his own advice. Alcohol and drug use soon became a dangerous habit. Adams was no longer the same reliable performer he used to be. His matches weren't as sharp, and his body was breaking down after decades in the ring. Worse, his personal relationships were suffering too. Friends and colleagues tried to help, but Adams was caught in a cycle that only seemed to get worse with time. Then came the moment that truly changed everything. In April 2000, Chris Adams and his girlfriend, Linda Kapengst, were at his home in Texas. The two had reportedly been drinking heavily that night and also took a drug called GHB, sometimes referred to as a club drug because of its sedative effects. On its own, GHB can be risky, but when mixed with alcohol, it can be deadly. Unfortunately, that night turned into tragedy. Both Adams and Linda overdosed. Adams lost consciousness but eventually recovered. Linda, however, wasn't so lucky. She was rushed to the hospital, but doctors found she had suffered severe brain damage. Not long after, she was declared brain dead and passed away. The wrestling community was stunned when the story broke. Fans who remembered Gentleman Chris Adams couldn't believe what they were hearing. How could such a respected wrestler be at the center of something so tragic? Authorities launched an investigation, and Adams was charged with manslaughter for allegedly supplying the drugs that caused Linda's death. It was an incredibly serious charge, and his court case was still pending when his life came to a shocking and sudden end. For Adams, this was the lowest point he had ever reached. His reputation had been destroyed, his career was gone, and now he was facing the possibility of prison. He was living a nightmare of his own making. Despite the chaos, Adams tried to rebuild what was left of his life. He went back to training wrestlers, hoping to find purpose again. Some reports say he was making an effort to get clean and stay focused, but others close to him claimed that his struggles with alcohol never really stopped. He was trying to keep his mind off the upcoming trial, but the stress was clearly wearing him down. By 2001, Adams was living with his friend and roommate, Brent "Boo Ray" Parnell, in Waxahachie, Texas. Brent was a former wrestler too, someone who understood the lifestyle and had known Adams for years. The two got along well most of the time, but alcohol often changed that. Their friendship was a mix of loyalty, tension, and drunken arguments, something that would eventually turn deadly. On the night of October 7, 2001, Adams and Parnell were reportedly drinking together at their home. As the night went on, an argument broke out between them. What started as a heated discussion quickly escalated into a full-blown fight. According to witnesses, Adams became violent and started attacking Parnell. In the chaos, Parnell grabbed a gun and shot Adams, claiming it was in self-defense. When police arrived, they found Chris Adams dead at the scene. He was only 46 years old. The news spread fast, and the wrestling world was left in total shock. For many fans, it felt unreal. This was the same Chris Adams who once dazzled audiences with his technique and charm, the man who helped train Stone Cold Steve Austin, one of wrestling's biggest icons. And now, he was gone in such a violent, tragic way. In the weeks that followed, more details came out. Investigators confirmed that both Adams and Parnell had been drinking heavily that night. The shooting was ruled self-defense, and no charges were filed against Parnell. But the damage was already done. The gentleman, who once stood for skill and respect, had died in a drunken brawl, his life ending in chaos instead of glory. And that's it for today's video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss an update.